Nobody told me that just sleep more was useless advice until I proved it myself by gaining 25 pounds, even as a certified personal trainer in my first year on the job as a firefighter. But the problem wasn't my effort, it was that shift life was destroying my sleep quality and I didn't know how to fix it. And because of that, I never had the energy to follow through on losing the weight. Having good rest and recovery was the thing that made everything else work. So in this video, I'm gonna be walking you through the 6-step firefighter sleep protocol that gave me my energy back, also helped me drop the 25 pounds, and has helped hundreds of other career firefighters improve deep and REM sleep by 20% without a single extra hour in bed. And the step that makes all of the others possible starts 16 hours before you even think about going to sleep. So let's start at the beginning of the day. The problem I had early on was that I was getting woken up constantly on shift, and it was confusing my body's internal clock, my circadian rhythm. This is the mechanism that tells your body when it's time to wind down and release melatonin, and when that gets disrupted repeatedly, it kind of stops working the way it should. So I was crashing hard at 2 p.m. and then lying awake when I actually needed to sleep. Think of your circadian rhythm like a clock that has to make it all the way to the number 10 before your body is ready to sleep. Every wake up is gonna push that clock back a few hours, and the more consistently it happened, the further behind I fell. And the fix was actually more simple than I expected. All I had to do was control my morning sunlight exposure regardless of how my night went. I made it a point to get outside within the first 30 minutes of waking, even if it was overcast and the light was indirect. That one habit reset my internal clock to 0 every single day and gave my body its best shot at actually getting tired at the right time. So step 1 of the protocol was 16 hours before sleep, get outside and get sunlight exposure to reset the rhythm. Now I had a way to reset the clock, but even with that locked in, I was still struggling. And it came down to something I was putting in my body every single day. And this is usually the first thing I lock in with every new client. And it's almost always the one that surprises them the most. As a firefighter, I leaned on caffeine to survive shifts and the days that followed them. What I didn't realize though, was that even when I could fall asleep, caffeine was sabotaging the quality of my deep and my REM sleep. I'd get a full 8 hours and still wake up completely wrecked. Here's how it usually played out. I'd get up after a rough night at the station, head straight to that coffee table with the crew, and that first cup, my God, that was everything. It worked great until about 1 p.m. when the crash hit and I went for another one, and that second cup felt fine until I found myself staring at the ceiling at night, exhausted, but wide awake, wondering, why isn't my body turning off? And that's when I learned that caffeine stayed in my system for around 10 hours total, so I reverse engineered it. If I wanted quality deep sleep and not just hours in bed, I had to be intentional about when the last cup went in, and I made a commitment, no matter what, to cut caffeine off 10 hours before sleep. When I did this, falling asleep got faster, and the quality of the hours I did get improved significantly. So step 2 of the protocol, cut caffeine 10 hours prior to sleep. This one step alone got me falling asleep and getting better rest than I could have ever imagined. And it didn't just work for me, it worked for my client Gail, a captain out of the Bay Area who was able to get rid of 10 to 15 pounds of stubborn belly fat with the energy he got following this protocol. He was constantly under the stress of his responsibilities, and no matter how much effort he wanted to put in, he found himself falling behind because of energy. We introduced the entire protocol from this video, and he lost 15 pounds in 90 days. By the way, if you want access to the protocols he got started with, I have them listed for free in the description. All right, so caffeine timing got handled, but I was still leaving recovery on the table, and this time it was what I was eating and when. What I didn't know early on was that eating too close to bedtime was actually having a serious impact on my ability to go into deep and REM sleep. Even when I thought I was recovering fine because I was still falling asleep, that wasn't the case. Think of it like triage. Your body prioritizes what's most urgent, and when food is actively digesting, that becomes a priority 1 job. The restorative processes that need to happen during sleep, those happen in deep and REM sleep, and they get bumped to priority 2. And you can double this effect if alcohol is involved. Once I understood that, the fix was fairly straightforward. The body needs around 3 hours to work through digestion, so I made a commitment to cutting off food and alcohol 3 hours before sleep. I obviously had more control over this on my off days than on shift, and that was fine because consistency always beats perfection. That was always the goal from the start. So step 3 of the protocol, no food or alcohol 3 hours before sleep. Now, even with the food timing locked in, I'd still sometimes lie there wide awake, and it took me a while to figure out why. But eventually, I figured out the issue with my nervous system being stimulated. And in fact, one of my clients, Kyle, a Metro Detroit fireman, told me this single step was what finally got him waking up feeling well rested for the first time in years on shift. Even with caffeine and food dialed in, I was still struggling to fall asleep on some nights, and it was because I was training late, working on projects late, and then expecting my body to just switch off right after. Think of your body like it's an engine, and it's an engine that's been running hard all day. Even after you turn it off, it needs time to cool down before it's ready to sit still. And that cooling doesn't happen the moment the key comes out of the ignition. I realized my body couldn't go from 100 to 0 in 20 minutes, so I started shifting both physical and mental training or stimulating work to earlier in the day. Not only did my sleep improve, but I actually got more consistent with those activities because I had more energy earlier in the day, and the things I did first, they got done. I see this same thing happen with nearly every firefighter I work with. Like Angie out of Albuquerque, she would train late into her shifts or on her days off, but had trouble falling asleep at night. We started her training earlier in the day, and this problem evaporated. The sweet spot was 2 hours, no physical or mental stimulation in the 2 hours before sleep, which makes this step 4 in the protocol. Eliminate stimulating activity, whether it's mental or physical, 2 hours before sleep. All right, now I was really making progress with this, but there was one more thing working against me, which was blue light. This one tied directly back to step 1. I was using morning sunlight to reset my circadian rhythm at the start of the day, but if I kept exposing myself to light late at night, my body couldn't tell the difference between the sunlight and a screen, and it kept pushing that clock forward. Remember the clock from step 1. Morning sunlight restarts it at 0, so the body builds towards sleep at the right time, but staying exposed to bright or artificial light late at night keeps resetting it. And the window where your body is actually ready to sleep keeps getting pushed back. And there were 2 ways I handled this. The simplest was dimming all the lights and cutting screens 1 hour before sleep. But if I'm being honest, I wasn't always willing to give up the wind down Netflix show at the end of the night. And for that, a pair of tinted blue light blocking glasses worn for that final hour was pretty much just as effective at shielding my body from the artificial light that was working against it. So step 5 was this: prioritize blocking artificial light 1 hour before sleep. Now we have one more step to cover, and none of them compound the way they should without this last one, and it's the one that I certainly overlooked. None of the other 5 steps sticked the way they should when this last one wasn't in place for me, and that is because the body cares more about consistency in your sleep schedule than almost any other variable, including total hours. Think of it like a savings account. The person who puts money away consistently every payday will always build more over time than the person who does it randomly and when they feel like it. Sleep timing works exactly the same way, and the research treats consistency as at least as important as total hours, if not more so. So I stopped obsessing over my wake up alarm and started prioritizing the time I went to sleep instead. I set a reverse alarm, an alarm that told me when it was time to go to sleep, and I actually listened when it went off. That one shift pulled the whole protocol together. And it is step 6, set a reverse alarm and go to sleep when it tells you to. So here's the full sleep protocol laid right out in front of you in the hours prior to sleep. 16 hours, get outside and get sunlight. 10 hours, cut off caffeine. 3 hours, cut off food and alcohol. 2 hours, cut off stimulating physical and mental activity. And 1 hour, cut out blue light exposure. And 0, set your reverse alarm and go to bed. Follow this and you won't just have more energy, you'll finally have enough in the tank to stay consistent with a fat loss routine and actually see the results from it. Now, if you want help applying a full system around your schedule and your station life, that's exactly what I do. I've coached over 500 career firefighters to drop 20 to 40 pounds, improve their mobility, and get their energy back in 16 weeks. If that sounds like what you need, you can find a link with the coaching information in the description. And what we didn't cover today is the diet side of fat loss, because fixing your sleep gives you the energy to follow through, but you still need to know what to eat around a shift schedule, which is what this next video covers, and it's a lot more simple than you think. If you want to see what it looks like, you can find it right here.